podcast where we're passionate about unleashing God-given potential through the life-transforming power of the gospel. I'm Raquel.
And I'm Ali.
And today we are going to be hearing a little bit about Ali's journey, Ali's story, how she came to know God, and just her testimony that she's keen to share with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Introduce yourself for people who don't know you. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Ali. I'm 21 and I'm studying a Bachelor of International Studies, majoring in Development and International Aid. And for those who don't really know, it's quite a niche course. So it's learning about global issues, including poverty, climate change, gender equality, a little bit of politics, which is always interesting, and how we can help those issues. And I guess a fun hobby that I love to read. You'll often find me sitting out in the sun having a little book to read because I'm a Queensland girl, loud and proud. So where there is sun, there is me and a book.
Yep. If you ever need a good book rec, you can always go to Ali.
Yes.
Amazing. For those of you listening who don't know, Ali, do you want to tell us a bit about how you sort of came into Avenue?
Yeah, of course. So I met Jeremy at the start of 2023 and I didn't really know anything about Jeremy. I didn't know about Avenue at all either. I also didn't believe in God at this point, so the interaction kind of just left my mind. Sorry, Jeremy. So it didn't even faze me. And then when I started my faith journey at the end of 2023, I was like, I want to try and find a church that I can belong to. And so I started at a Pentecostal church, and that was great. It was really good for the first couple months, but I grew up going to a Seventh-day Adventist school in Queensland, and so I was like, I really just want that sense of community that I had there. And then I just went on Instagram and I DM'd the Avenue page, and next thing I know, Jeremy is like, "Hey Ali, you remember me? We met like a year ago." So yeah, that was pretty much how I came to Avenue. I went to an intersection and I've been here ever since.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Before that, what was your life sort of before coming to God or finding out about Jesus? Paint us a picture.
Yeah, so my life was very chaotic. I always felt like I was living in survival mode. I grew up with my single mom and my two sisters, and we were rich in love. We weren't rich in money. So we spent a lot of time moving around wherever we could afford to live, like with friends and family. And it just kind of always felt like we were being thrown problems at us, like every now and then. And I don't know, I was always just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. And so hence the survival mode. I just kind of shut off and I did what I had to do. And I don't know, I just always felt angry at God because why were the people that I found so kind and so genuine and, my family who I love very much being treated this way? And I think it definitely put me off like my faith journey for much longer than it needed to because I just was so angry and I needed to put my blame on someone. That's kind of a bit of a backstory of how I grew up in an atheist environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you feel like that sort of anger with God? Did you believe that there could be a God at that point, or did you just think if the world is so horrible, there can't be a God?
I think growing up, going to a Seventh-day Adventist school, I kind of knew there was a God, but I just didn't know enough about it.
Yeah. Okay.
About him or about the Bible. So, yeah, I think it was a bit difficult for me growing up in an atheist family because they were very supportive, but I just didn't know. So it was a bit hard.
Yeah. So how did your journey with God actually start?
Yeah, so in 2023, I had a very difficult year. It was pretty much my rock bottom. I had just moved interstate for the third time in my life, going from Brisbane to Melbourne. And I was moving for a uni course that I just wasn't really certain on. I never really knew my purpose before knowing Jesus. I was so lost. And then like partway through the year, I started developing some pretty hard-hitting health issues. So I was severely underweight. I was 39 kilos at one point, which is just crazy to think about. I also had some vitamin deficiencies and liver, kidney issues that started popping up. And then at the same time, I started like developing anxiety. Like I wouldn't leave the house unless I had to go to like doctors. And if I went to grocery stores, I would make sure someone was with me. And I didn't really know that this was happening while it was happening. I was just kind of in my own state of mind, which was, really difficult. And then of course, when the anxiety started to like get really bad, I quit my job and I was unemployed. And I think at one point I had like $7 in my bank account, which is very stressful. And then I dropped out of uni. That one wasn't too hard. I wasn't really loving the course I was doing at the uni I was at. And then, at the same time, I was also going through a breakup after a long-term relationship. And I think, everybody goes through breakups differently. That it's always completely different for everyone. But in my case, I was really struggling to process my emotions while I was struggling with everything else going on in my life, So that took a huge toll on me as well. But, I was also just really struggling without a support system. Like my family and my friends, all interstate. Like I just couldn't find my people down here while I was isolated, because I had isolated myself. And, I didn't have someone tapping me on the shoulder going like, hey, like what's going on with your life? What are your plans? And so I just assumed me isolating myself was just fine. Like I didn't think anything of it. And so while this was all happening, I was just completely depressed and I was essentially drowning. Yeah. Like it was horrible. I think at this point I had just turned 20 and I was like, I don't want to be alive.
Yeah.
And that is really hard to sit with. It is incredibly hard to sit with. Like I would go to sleep some nights and I'm like, I don't want to wake up.
Yeah.
And, thinking that at 20 years old, it's just frightening because I was okay. I felt like I had lived 80 years worth of life at 20 years old. And so I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I really, really don't want to be alive anymore. And even if I was to like start healing, I was so overwhelmed because like, where would I start healing? My body needed the most help because it needed to heal physically, but my mental health was also pretty horrible. And, they're so interlinked, like physical and mental health, they intersect so much because when one's not doing so well, the other one is affected. And it was just like an endless cycle of what do I even do? Like, where do I begin? And so, yeah, I was very scared and it was a very hard time in my life.
Yeah, that must have been really difficult, especially with all the health issues that you faced and then also being interstate and being away from your support system. Like you said, you underestimate, I think, sometimes if you have that support system there, how hard it would be without it there. So what sort of changed for you when you were going through all of that? Breakups can be really hard. Mental health issues, physical health issues. What was sort of a turning point for you, or when did you, I guess, realize that maybe I need something else?
I genuinely wish I could remember, but I do not remember. I just remember it being in November and I think I was just in a really low point. I was like, what have I got to lose? Like it can only really go up from here because it was my version of rock bottom pretty much. And I had seen a lot of my friends who are Seventh-day Adventists have very devastating things happen to them and they just came out so much better than before because they had God in their lives.
Wow.
And so I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot, which sounds super weird, but I didn't know anything about the Bible. I knew Veggie Tales from grade 3 pretty much. That's my extent of knowledge on the Bible. And so I just started reading the Bible, you just Google where's the best place to start the Bible, and started in Matthew, of course, Gospels. And then I started praying, and I started listening to Christian music. And I don't know, it was after a couple months where I noticed like positive things starting to happen to me.
Yeah.
And before I know it, like my health is so much better from an amazing medical team as well. But like I put in a lot of work for my health, and I'm healthy and alive, which is incredible. And so since my health was getting better, I could get a job again. I have found my inner circle. Like, it's been incredible experience. And, you know, I feel very special to know that I've had some pretty good spiritual moments happen in my life. So I knew that I'm supposed to work in the development sector. Like, my passion became clear when I knew Jesus. And that is mind-blowing to me, honestly. Going 20 years without knowing what you want to do, and then just one moment in my car, and it has changed my life forever. I've had so many doors open up, and I feel very grateful that I know my purpose now. And of course, found Avenue, and I found my home away from home. So it's been a great ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so good to hear as well. And, you know, the journey that you've had has really been amazing. I guess, what did this realization lead to when you sort of, you know, you started praying, started developing a relationship with God? How did that make you feel?
I was overjoyed.
Yeah.
I was overjoyed that, I don't know, you have an endless comfort from God, and it's like a hug, you know, and I didn't feel alone anymore. Like, even if I hadn't met anyone either during these couple months where I was just reading the Bible, and it just felt like a huge hug. And I guess the way I see it now, Jesus gave me a second chance at life, genuinely. And I really do believe that, because I was ready to give up. And, you know, since he gave me a second chance at life, I believe this is my chance to help and advocate for those who are struggling and can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, because there is a light, and I just want to show that to people. You just got to get through it. It's just, Jesus can help you find your way through it. And so I think that, you know, life is scary and unpredictable, and it's incredibly hard, but it's also beautiful and kind and uniquely yours to live. And I just think that everyone deserves to see Jesus work in the mundane day-to-day life. So, you know, I'm very grateful for my change of mindset, because I was depressed and lonely, and, you know, I didn't want to wake up. Whereas, like, now I like walk down the street and I'm dancing. Like, I will go on my hot girl walks and I will dance, and people look at me weirdly, but I'm like, just have a little boogie. Like, life's okay. Just slow down. And so, yeah, it's been a long time. It's been a couple years of changing this mindset, and I couldn't be more grateful for, honestly, everything that Jesus has given me. So yeah.
And I really see that in you as well. If you know Ali, she loves to take photos of things. And it's so amazing, because you really stop and take stock of the small things, and you notice the little things, and it doesn't take a lot for something to bring you joy. And I think that's really amazing and a real testament to what God has done in your life, because you just find the beauty in everything around you, even if it's something like flowers or a nice day or the sun.
It's always the sun. It's always the sun.
But that's something really amazing that I see that God has given you. And I see, obviously I didn't know you before this change, before you came to Avenue, but I do see the impact that God has on your life, and has on your outlook on things. And so that's really, really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so how did it feel sort of going from that, from going from rock bottom and meeting God, but also sort of coming further along in that spiritual journey and finding like a church community? How was that for you?
It was quite difficult, actually. This is like changing your whole mindset. Like, I went 20 years without believing in God, and so I still struggle a lot with, you know, my thought processes. But I always knew, I was like, I want to find a church because I love Jesus and I want to share that with people. I didn't really have anyone to share that with, and I was like, I don't understand things going on in the Bible. I need to talk about this with people because it was a bit hard. And you know, I could say this for ages and ages and ages. I love what Avenue is doing with Pathways. Like, I think that was my saving grace, because if I went to a normal church every week, I don't think I'd have learnt as much as I have at Pathways, because you know, you go to Pathways, you sit down, you have a meal, and you talk about the Bible, which is everything I think that Jesus is about, like love and connection.
Absolutely.
And so I've learnt a lot going to Pathways, and Intersection as well is a great way to connect with people. But I just felt like it was the best environment for me to ask questions as well, because I think I've asked you guys 6 times what an Israelite is.
Yeah.
and you say it every time. You answer me with no oh, you know, this is an Israelite. Like, you always answer me truthfully and then move on, which is fantastic, because I need that, because it's the Bible's so hard for me to grasp. And so I really appreciated that space to go to every week, and in a judgment-free zone. But I also love the discipleship that Avenue is trying to implement, because I have learnt so much from you and Josh. When I came into this, I was at the highest point of my faith. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. Nothing's going to stop me. And then when I hit my low, you guys were like, it's okay. This happens. We knew that this was going to happen. And I was like, oh, I didn't. I didn't know this was going to happen. And so you're like, it's okay. You will have highs and lows in your faith, which I think is really important to, know, especially as a new Christian. And, I don't think faith would be as strong as it is without the doubt.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really good about the discipleship process, because it's good, for me personally as well, it's really good because I stop just taking things for granted. I might look at something and be like, oh yeah, I know that, but that's with my background. I've grown up with it. It makes sense to me, and sometimes you need that outside perspective, and that different perspective to actually look at things in a different way and think, oh, well, maybe I actually hadn't considered this. Or, yeah, if you don't have, background insight on this, it does look really different. And so that's, been really powerful, and it's been so amazing to watch you journey through and be learning all these different things for the first time. That's really exciting for me to look at. I know you're also excited for it. But yeah, that's just been really amazing to watch you grow, and not just in sort of actual knowledge, but just grow in the gifts and what God is giving you. So that's been really amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important to have different perspectives on Bible verses.
Yeah,
I've learned that
absolutely.
every person I meet has a different perspective on a Bible verse, and I think that's really important for everyone to just get a broader knowledge. But yeah, so thank you though.
Yeah. No, I think that's important because, as we sort of talk to different people and reach out to different people, every person is going to have their own background and their own different experience with God, with the Bible, with church. And it's those different experiences that actually make our community much richer.
I agree.
And, your perspective, if we have someone new coming into the church, your perspective is so amazing because you can really connect with people and say hey, I know what it's like to not believe in God, to have doubts, to feel like I don't know everything. And that's what I love about this community, and that's what I love about you sharing your story, because it can be really impactful and powerful for other people to go, okay, well, I don't know everything either. Maybe my story is also important and valuable.
Yeah. I love hearing even your guys' stories, because even though you grew up in the church, you still had to make the decision to keep following Jesus when you hit like 16 or 15 or whatever. You still decide to keep going. And so that's very inspiring, because I know a lot of people, they can drift away growing up in a Christian household. So I love to hear like all your guys' knowledge as well, because it really helps me. But I do, of course, love hearing other people's stories as well. If, you know, they've been through hard times, I can relate as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so.
Yeah. And yeah, it's so important just to be listening to other people's stories, which is why this is such an exciting opportunity for you to come here. But yeah, are there any, I guess, takeaways from your experience, from your life, from your journey with God, that you've sort of learned over this time?
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, I finished John. I love John. I could rave about it for ages. Everybody's heard me rave about John. But there's a specific Bible verse that I wanted to share. It's John chapter 13, verse 7. Jesus replied, "You don't understand what I am doing, but someday you will." And I know it's a cliche one, but man, is it true. Like, trust in God's process. I cannot stress that enough. Like, in hindsight, there have been so many moments where I should have looked to God, but I just wasn't ready, I don't think. And I was scared and I didn't know how to do it. But I needed my life to just hit the rock bottom. I really did, so that I could look to Jesus. And, you know, I think when you're trusting in God's process and in his timeline, it puts us in a waiting period. And humans don't like waiting periods. We're always constantly looking for the next step, what our next task will be. And it puts us in an uncomfortable state. But I think there's something so special about waiting periods. Like, God wants us to rest, to stop and just enjoy the world that he's given us. Like, God made oceans and lakes and sand and grass. And I just think that's so exciting to just go out and, feel, because he's giving you this time to just rest. And I don't know, I think there's something so special about those waiting periods. Of course, they're hard. They're incredibly hard because you want to just keep moving. Yeah. But enjoy the waiting period. That's all I can say, because God's got your back and you know that. So go and enjoy the sun,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I feel like I'm like a walking advertisement for the sun.
It's a good reminder.
Yeah. So I think God wants us to appreciate the world while he's working in the background.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So there are a lot of gardening metaphors throughout the Bible, which I really like.
Raquel loves to garden.
If you didn't know. But yeah, one of those is how God is sort of the gardener, and he looks after what he has created. And, when you plant a seed, you put it in the ground, and before it grows up out of the ground, it grows roots. And there's probably a lot of people who have heard this analogy a lot of times. But
it's my first time hearing it.
Yeah, there you go. It's it's the first time for anyone. But before it grows up, it has to grow down. And, the longer it takes sometimes to grow down and really spread its roots and cement itself in the soil, the stronger the plant will be. And so I think, like what you said about the waiting period, sometimes you might be in that period and you're waiting and you're not seeing any upward growth. And you're like, hey, I'm not moving. Nothing's happening in my life. It's stagnant. Like, I'm waiting for things to get better, but there's just no sign of life, no growth at all. But that's God doing the work behind the scenes. And like you said, our timing is flawed. We think,
Yes.
we've decided one thing one day and it should happen the next day. Yeah. But that's not life. That's not reality. And in reality, often the time when you are waiting or you are not growing as much as you can see, that is when God is actually doing the work underneath the soil in your roots. That's when he's actually doing the most work, and that is what is going to set you up for success later when you become a new shoot and you grow into a tree. But yeah, so I think that's really amazing, and I love that verse as well. It's such a classic.
I really believe in that metaphor. I'm so glad that you have taught it to me for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I completely agree. Sometimes you need to go be in the downest of downs before you can grow up. And it took me years to get to where I am right now. Like, I didn't know my purpose for 20 years of my life, and it just happened on one day. Like, it's a growing thing, and you need to go through what you need to go through to get to the point you are right now. And like, I don't know if I'd be sitting here right now if I had, decided to pick up the Bible. So, and that's that's very special to me, and I'm lucky to have that story and the testimony to tell other people to help them,
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and it's such a powerful testimony. I just want to thank you for sharing it with us. Yeah, I think it's such an amazing story of how God can impact someone even when they feel at their lowest.
Yeah.
His timing is always right, even if you don't realize it at the time. And I think, they say hindsight is 20/20, and I think you always look back and you think, wow, how amazing this is happening.
I feel very grateful. Like, I have so many moments where I can look back and I'm like, oh, I should have looked to Jesus then, but I didn't, but I do now, so it's fine. But it's so incredible to look back at my life and think of how far I've come. And I remember the first time I told my mum that I believed in Jesus, and it was on FaceTime, and she was like, oh, so that's why the light is back in your eyes again. And it sticks with me, because I'm like, she noticed that like I was starting to get my life back together, and it took a lot of energy and work to do that. And it always does. It can take years, it can take months. It depends on how long it takes. It's different for everyone, but it does happen. You can, if you want to, change. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your testimony. I know it's been really impactful for me to hear as well, just little bits here and there that even, are new every time you tell it.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
I know this will impact, everyone who listens to it. But yeah, thank you guys as well for listening. And come back next week as we hear more stories from people who are experiencing God. Yeah.
Have a good day.
Thank you for listening.